Thank you, Benny, for inviting me, and I'm really thrilled to be here. This is not really my field. You are not the normal audience that I would address. I've been working with innovation policy for 6 years now for the Danish government, and 5 years ago I did a study for the Danish government on the future of innovation, and we worked together with CK Prahalat, which was one of the world's leading business professors at that time. And what we discovered back then was that what will drive innovation in the future was not going to be technology anymore. Of course, technology will still be important, but what will drive the future of innovation would be solving the grand challenges that we face in the world. Benny mentioned it in his presentation, and what we see is that the complexity of the global challenges that we face has now accelerated and it seems to increase exponentially. Benny showed it very beautifully in his slide, and it also seems that the level of which we can come up with innovative solutions to solve these problems is linear. So at some point in time, not very far from now, we will experience a gap between the level of innovation and the complex challenges that we face. And our job as politicians or as business leaders is to find a way to close this gap. What this study taught us was that we need to think of innovation, at least from a policy perspective, in a total different way. We need to find some way to make the public sector and the private sector work together in a much better way. Because the public sector can't solve these problems themselves, the private sector cannot solve them themselves, and we cannot only rely on technology as a tool for innovation to solve these problems. So this was kind of a game changer in innovation policy for Denmark. So when we had to write the new national innovation strategy for Denmark, we had to come up with some total different ideas that we were used to. And this was a new field to us. And suddenly we realized that this is not only addressing businesses or the private sector. This affects the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We suddenly had to work together with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs as well, because this concerns everybody. So also the developing countries, of course. So we started to look upon how can we start to innovate in new ways. How can we actually close this gap? It seems that the way the capitalistic society, sorry, I forgot this, the way the capitalistic society works today, it hasn't been able to address the major challenges in a satisfactory way. So we need to do some things differently. To be honest, we haven't really come up with the right way to solve this problem. How can we close this gap? We don't know. Basically, we don't know. So what this means is that we need to experiment. We need to try out new ways to work together. We need to explore. We need to create the framework, set up the framework to explore and to learn as we go along. That is actually what we are trying to do in Denmark now. We know that technology will still be important in the future as well, but more as an enabler of innovation. And also, what we have come to realize is the importance of what we have heard about today, design thinking. The capability of looking towards the users to understand the users in a better way. So these much more intangible ways of doing innovation is becoming more and more important. A very good example, I hope I'm not offending anybody, but we have looked towards the case of Better Place in Denmark. And Better Place produced electrical cars. It was a brilliant concept, and it was very, very good for the environment, etc. So we wanted the electrical cars. But the problem was that no one really, all the technology was in place, but no one really thought about, is the users actually going to like this? So the infrastructure for these electrical cars was not in place. The users, they didn't like the cars, so it ended up no one bought the cars. So it just told us something about how important it is to think in a different way. It's not enough that we have the technology, we need to look at the users as well and to think in system solutions. I can give you another example. We are doing an innovation study for the Danish government now as well, and it's aiming at big corporations and what will be their challenges in the future. And we talked to a bunch of CEOs from the biggest corporations in Denmark and actually also here in the US. And they tell us that, well, if you produce, let's say, an actuator for a hospital bed, it's a hydraulic pump that actually lifts the bed up and down. Well, you can be the world leader in that. But in the future, that will not be enough. You need to find some way to develop the system around this product as well, because you need to build in sensors in the hospital bed that can weigh the patient, tell you something about, oh, is the patient sweating, is too much pressure here and there. So the companies, they don't have these competencies in-house. They need to collaborate with different people. This is from the company perspective, but what if we should solve the grand societal challenges? This is even more complex. Think about, let's say, plastic to solve the environmental challenges. It's not enough to solve one part of the whole value chain for plastic. If you only look at one part of it, you don't solve the problem. So how do we come up with competencies to solve the whole system and the system that affects? As I told you, we don't know. So what we are doing in Denmark now is we are experimenting. And most of the times when I'm out speaking, people say, oh, you work for the Design Centre, isn't that about chairs and etc.? I said, yes, it is. It used to be at least. But now it's about innovation and how we can use the skills from design thinking to solve the world's problem. And design has actually been very highly prioritized by the Danish government since the beginning of the 1990s. And we have launched different programs to create awareness of how we need to innovate in a different way. We have launched a government program for user-driven innovation. We have launched the biggest design award in the world called Index Award, which rewards designs that can make a better life for people. An example is the Life Straw. I don't know if any of you have heard of that. It's a straw that if you put it into polluted water, you can actually, the straw will filter the water in a way that it cleans, so people in developing countries can use this straw. So these are the kind of examples that we reward with this initiative. And also we thought that it's not enough that we create awareness of how important it is that we think in a different way. We also need to change the mindset of policymakers, because what has been in the focus for policymakers for a long time is how can we create more growth, especially if we talk innovation policies. How can we create more growth, more jobs, more export, etc. But that doesn't solve the problems. Doesn't solve the problems. If we need to solve these grand societal challenges, we need to find a better way of putting something else in the middle, become more problem focused, and then we will have growth, of course, eventually when we come up with the right solutions, but it's not the only solution. All these initiatives I just mentioned are very good, but they are focusing on a very narrow area. And we have started to look into system changes. How can we come up with solutions for system changes? And again, we are experimenting here. We don't have the right answers yet, or at least we don't know if we have. But what we have tried to do is to introduce what we call intelligent public demand as a way to make the public sector and the private sector work together in a better way. It's actually an idea we got some years ago when me and some colleagues visited Dorthe in Washington. Dorthe has used the same innovation model since 1958, and it seems to work very well in the field of the Defense Department. And the UK has tried to implement that model as well for solving societal challenges in terms of the Technology Strategy Board, and now we are trying to do the same in Denmark. We realized that this cannot be implemented at a national scale. It's simply too complex. So what we are doing is we are trying to experiment in regional council and in the municipalities, and then we are trying to share that knowledge, the experiences, with other cities in the world that wants to address societal challenges to see if we can solve the problems. I think that was it. Thank you.